Hello again, everyone. It's Adam Caplan here for Inside the Birds, and this is our final installment of the schedule show. This will be games 13 through 17 for the Eagles. But I want to give you a couple notes before we get started, because when was it? This was Wednesday. There was some good news at Eagles practice at training camp as they opened their first practice. Jihad Campbell, clearly a couple weeks ahead of schedule, was able to get on the practice field. They put him in and out of reps. He was purposely limited. They remember he didn't really have an off season, and with the heat and everything, this is his first official practice. So they gave him limited reps. But the bottom line is he was on the field, mostly inside backer, did a little bit of edge. But the bottom line is this is great news, and we're not going to read into anything. We never do here at Inside the Birds. We've covered this business between myself and Jeff Mosher, Andrew DeCecco. You talk about me, 27 years, Jeff around 20, Andrew 5 or 6. I mean, we kind of know better. You make note of everything you read into absolutely nothing. It's day one. Don't go crazy. Uh, what we typically do to give you a kind of an idea of how you should look at information that's out there, not just from us, for anything you read in social media, from any reporter. What we do is we take a comprehensive look after a week. Yes, we have basically daily updates, whether online or shows like this, or regular Inside the Bird show. And by the way, we're going to have a huge one. Me, Jeff, and Andrew will be doing one for Friday morning at 6 a.m. Eastern, which will break down the first 2 days. Remember, they're off on Friday. I'm sorry, they have a walkthrough on Friday. By rule, you can't practice 3 days in a row yet. So, but after a week, and this is what we've mentioned before, we felt very strongly that after 1 week, Isaiah Rodgers had won the starting cornerback job actually the number 3 cornerback job uh, over Keely Ringo. We just felt Ringo didn't perform well, and Rodgers was so far ahead after 1 week, which is you don't normally see that. And remember, Rodgers. Another great story about Rodgers was he had the broken hand, and he still went in after missing a little bit of time in the regular season. When he had to fill in or play, he played. He did a great job. That's why he got a nice free agent deal. It was actually between the Eagles and the Vikings to retain his services, but to get his services, I should say. But bottom line is, don't go crazy of what you see in the first day or two. We just you don't read into anything, but you should always make a note of it where guys are. We've talked about this before, where guys have been lined up and what the depth charts look like. But then you see how it progresses. It changes, man, a lot. So don't go crazy with it. And another note for the folks on Patreon, you already have seen these videos. They're phenomenal. John DeFilippo, the Super Bowl winning quarterbacks coach for the Eagles, 2017 team. John did a great breakdown of how you prepare as a coach, a quarterbacks coach and offensive coordinator for OTAs, and then we did a second one just on training camp. It's phenomenal. We're going to put a clip out if you're not a Patreon member. Together, it's about 40 minutes, but we'll probably put about 6 or 7 minutes out from that. For those of you not Patreon members, you got to see this thing. There's folks, if you're not on Patreon, you're missing it. We had a great chat on Wednesday night, and folks, you got to see these things. We do it every week, all year, 52 weeks, folks. We do it. We do it every week, and we've done that for a couple years. And this is stuff you're not going to hear anywhere. No holds barred. Any question we'll answer. It's stuff we don't talk about on our regular shows. High level information exclusively on Patreon.com/Inside the Birds. All right. And with that, let's get started. So week 14, right? In games 13 through 17. At SoFi, a Monday night game, December 8th, 8:15 Eastern. The Eagles will play at the Chargers. They love playing in SoFi, obviously with the Rams, the Chargers and Rams. They play their home games there, but the Eagles have played the Rams there. They do very well there. The Chargers, who don't get a great home crowd, we know what happened in 17 at the former Home Depot Center, where the Chargers were playing until the SoFi was built. The Eagles own that stadium. It rocked. It was like 75% Eagle fans, so I'm sure it'll be heavy Eagles presence. So what are the Eagles looking at when their defense is on the field? You're seeing Greg Roman. You know what's coming. Most sophisticated running game of the National Football League, as a GM told me. He goes, it's very unorthodox, not just with fullbacks. He'll go 13 personnel. He'll play 3 tight ends, a lot of 12, some 11. Now, here's who they lost this year. J.K. Dobbins, who led them in rushing, he's now with Denver. They cut Gus Edwards. They lost Josh Palmer, which doesn't surprise me because this regime did not draft him. Josh Palmer was drafted by Tom Telesco, who is no longer in the NFL. He's actually doing some media, so good for Tom. But Josh Palmer signed a free agent deal with Buffalo. Who did they add? Trey Lance to be backup quarterback. Marion Hampton, one of my favorite running backs for this draft out of North Carolina, super explosive. Najee Harris, who unfortunately had the fireworks accident, so he'll be ready for the regular season, but there's no exact timeline when he'll be back during August for training camp. But Naheem Hines, he just signed. Good for Naheem to come back. He'll mostly see time in training camp on third downs and as a kickoff returner. They added Trey Harris, who they really like, out of Mississippi State as a second-round receiver. They signed Mike Williams, but he retired at 30 years old. He had a bunch of injuries, and he would have given some depth at receiver where they're a little bit light. They signed Tyler Conklin, who's a good tight end, an athletic tight end. Mekhi Becton will start at guard. So, what are the Eagles going to face when the Chargers are in 11 personnel? It'll be Quentin Johnston, who's their ex-receiver, who, you know what? I know people think he's a bust. He's not a bust. He did improve last season. He's not where he needs to be, but he did show some improvement. He's a big target, downfield target. Ladd McConkey was phenomenal as a rookie. He's their Z receiver. Trey Harris has really good size. So what they may do is have Harris as a Z and McConkey strictly as their X. We'll see how they do that, but they'll be able to play 11 with those guys. Jalen Reagor, I know he was a bust for the Eagles, but he's still hanging on. They brought him back for another season. Brennan Rice, Jerry Rice's son, is still there. When they go 12, it's going to be Will Dissly as their wide tight end, their inline, and Conklin will be their move tight end. And you know who they have? A very athletic tight end, Oronde Gadsden. You might remember his dad for the Dolphins, who was a longtime receiver. So Gadsden, who's going to be more of a move tight end, he's a willing blocker, but Dissly's a pretty good blocker. So they're going to have enough on offense. Now, their offensive line with Rashawn Slater, their left tackle, Joe Alt, who the Titans wanted badly last year to be their left tackle, but the Chargers beat him to it. Mekhi Becton will be the right guard. Zion Johnson and Bradley Bozeman make up the rest of their interior of their offensive line. Good signing of Andre James, who will back up at center, the former starting center for the Raiders. Now, Trey Pipkins, who could play right tackle. He could play guard. He started at both. So they'll have depth. And behind Justin Herbert, the quarterback, will be Heineke and Lance. And Scott Matlock, they're one of the teams that uses a fullback. Scott Matlock was a 6th-round fullback 2 years ago, a former defensive tackle. So they're loaded on offense, folks. That's not the problem. Can the Eagles put pressure, particularly on the interior, where they're not great, the Chargers? And Mekhi Becton, our understanding with him was, yes, obviously it was a great story at playing guard. He never played before prior to last season. He wasn't quite as good as people thought he was, but he was solid. There's some technique issues with him last year, but you have to expect that when he's moved from a different position. But a great story of development. And they could give some Eagles some fits, especially with Marion Hampton. And with all the changes the Eagles have on the front, on their front seven, we got to see if they could stop the run. But we'll learn more about that in training camp. So that's what we're looking at with the Chargers offense, and then the Eagles defense you all know about. Now, defensively for the Chargers, under Jesse Minter, his dad, Rick, is part of his staff. Rick used to be part, if you remember, of Chip Kelly's staff. And Rick was the former head coach at University of Cincinnati, and he knows the Harbaugh brothers. So Jesse runs a 34 front, does a great job. They did a lot with a little talent. They don't blitz very much, only 24% blitz rate last season. They don't play a lot of man. Under 20% man. They lost a lot of players. Both their starting D tackles are gone. Poona Ford signed a big free agent deal with the Rams. Morgan Fox, veteran D tackle, signed with the Falcons. Joe Bosa they cut. Was one of the better edge rushers for many years. He signed with Buffalo. Christian Fulton, a very inconsistent former second-round pick of the Titans. Did okay at times with the Chargers, but inconsistent. He signed with the Chiefs. And Asante Samuel is a free agent, coming back from the neck issue. They did sign Ben St. Juste, who got benched last season with Washington. Dante Jackson is now kind of a journeyman at corner. When you look at their situation on defense, I know it's well coached. They brought Deshaun Hannon from Miami as a journeyman D tackle. Tier Tart, Philly's own, It's been a great story of development, considering he was signed as an undrafted free agent with the Titans. He's kind of moved on a little bit. They're not really good with their front three. Now, Tui Pelotu, Marlon Tui Pelotu's brother, is a big time talent. He's in his third year as an edge rusher. He's really good. Mac's still there, getting it done in his mid 30s. Bud Dupree got a new deal. They like this Kyle Kennard, who's a fourth round rookie out of South Carolina, who's kind of interesting. Now, look, the Eagles have an elite offensive line. You're not really worried. I mean, you have to. Tui Pelotu is a really talented edge rusher. They're good at inside backer with Juna Colston and Danian Henley. He was a third round pick 2 years ago. Was really good. Denzel Perryman probably won't start. He's an older player with a lot of injuries, but they're good there. The problem that I have with the Chargers is at corner. Tarheeb Still was a great story of development as a fifth round corner. As a fifth round nickel. Great story out of Maryland. But at corner, it's a little shaky with the aforementioned Dante Jackson and St. Just. Can't trust him. We'll see where they line up Jasir Taylor. They're really good at safety. In fact, they'll play some big nickel, which they did last year with Molden, the great Derwin James, and Elohi Gilman. They have depth, but man, I don't see a big time corner out of there. If I'm the Eagles, I'm spreading them out and I'm going deep. And the Eagles will be able to handle them. That's a game, for me on paper, I would have the Eagles as a 2 or 3 point favorite. Let's go to week 15. This game is at home against another AFC West opponent on the 14th of December, 1 p.m. Eastern start. So the Las Vegas Raiders, will be traveling to Philly on 3 different time zones. That's like 10 a.m. for them. That's never good. Now, what do the Raiders do? We'll look at their offense first versus the Eagles' defense. It's Geno Smith, who Chip Kelly loved for that draft in 2013. But as I reported at that point, the Eagles did not have a good pre-draft meeting with him, and they moved off of him. But they're kind of reunited in a way. Well, they never worked together, but that was Chip's guy. Ashton Jeanty, the lock first-round pick, they weren't really hiding it. Geno and Ashton Jeanty, they're going to run the ball. They're going to be a low-volume pass game offense. They brought in Raheem Mostert, who actually Chip signed, or how he signed, but he was with the Eagles in 2015, I believe. So Chip knows him. He also, I think he might have had him. Did he have him with the Niners in 2016? I'm not sure, but I know Chip knows him. Mostert is still fast, but he's not the same player he once was. Jack Besh, their second-round receiver, is more of a slot receiver. Alex Kappa, man, it's not good when you're cut. When the Bengals have a less than average offensive line, when they cut you, he's a guard, by the way. That would worry me a little bit. Now the Raiders with Colton Miller at left tackle. Powers Johnson will start at center. Dylan Parham is a really good guard out of Memphis. He's in his fourth year. Kappa probably will start at right guard. DJ Glaze at right tackle most likely. Not a great offensive line. This is an offensive line that can be beat. At receiver, they're fast, but not very deep, not very talented. Trey Tucker did not work out as a starter. That was a mistake last season. He's a fourth receiver, not a 2. When they go 11, Besh could play inside or outside. He could be their Z. Jacoby Myers, who's done very well, by the way, signed by Josh McDaniels and Dave Ziegler when coming over from the Raiders when they were running their front office. Myers is still there, but they're just not very deep at receiver. Trey Tucker could run, but he was totally miscast. It's really, folks, it's all about Brock Bowers. And Michael Mayer will be their wide tight end, and Ian Thomas comes over to give them depth at tight end. To me, it's coming. A lot of 12 personnel. You just got to get physical with Brock Bowers. He's not the most physical guy, but he's super athletic. Geno loves to throw the deep ball, intermediate area. They'll do that with Trey Tucker. And this kid, Dante Thornton, fourth rounder out of Tennessee, who could run, who's got length. He's over 6'4". You got to keep an eye on him. But again, they're not very talented there. You just got to slow down Bowers. Ashton Jeanty, super physical. He's going to grind carries. Mostert and Zamir White will be Zamir White and Dylan Lobby. Unfortunately, I hope he makes a team. He's explosive. They got to figure out a way to use him. Eagles match up very well. Aiden O'Connell, by the way, will back up Geno Smith. Eagles defense matches up very well against this offense. I don't see the Raiders in Philly doing much on offense. Now, defensively, they run a 34 front, and I got to tell you, they're really well coached from Patrick Graham. Graham runs the Belichick system, higher than average man coverage, 29% blitz rate, just above the league average, around 26%. They lost Chasen, the former first-round edge rusher from the Jaguars, who revived his career. He's more of a backup. Divine Diablo, who signed with the Falcons. Robert Spillane, they also lost him. Very underrated inside backer, signed with the Patriots. Mayrig, who was drafted by Mike Mayock, a really good player, by the way, signed a big free agent deal with Carolina. And they lost Marcus Epps, who unfortunately had the ACL injury a couple years ago, signed with New England as well. Brought in Landon Roberts from the Steelers. Jermaine Pratt, who was cut by the Bengals. Corner, they're not very good. Eric Stokes, a former first-round pick for the Packers, has been a disappointment. Darian Porter, though, they got in the draft, one of the tallest corners for the draft. And Jeremy Chinn had a good year with Washington. So, to me, they're not very talented, but where their talent is on that front four with the great Crosby. You know, he had a high ankle sprain last year. That's why his numbers were down. Malcolm Kuntz didn't play last season due to a knee injury. Christian Wilkins is coming back with that foot injury. Got to keep an eye on him, but they're talented. Tyree Wilson, who can play inside at nickel, who hasn't really made it yet as an edge rusher. We mentioned the linebackers. The secondaries where they got all sorts of problems. They could probably mix and match, but they're really weak at corner. And this is a team, if you could protect, the Eagles could protect against anyone. I'm going after that secondary. This is a game the Eagles should blow them out. If the Eagles are at least average against the run, they'll blow this team out. Now, let's go to week 16. I can't wait for this one. And let me explain to you. This game is at Washington on a Saturday, December 20th. The time is not determined. Now, understand, and I talked to the league about this in their media call before, in the spring after the schedule was announced. The reason why they have these late, they want meaningful games late in the season. They're projecting. They believe in the Commanders. And they do a projection of how they think teams are going to do. And they want them in, this probably will be some sort of primetime game. They are now back to being a national team. It's been a couple decades since they were one, but they were a big-time national team in the 70s and 80s. And not so much after Dan Snyder bought the team, but they're expecting them to be good. Now, let's look at what they added. Krosky Merritt is a change-up 7th-round pick who's got a chance to make the team. Debo Samuel, obviously in a trade. He's reunited with Adam Peters, the Washington general manager, the former personnel director for the Niners, and Jalen Lane, who's a really athletic slot receiver who's a pretty talented kid. I'm interested to see what he does for them. And he'll help them run more 11 personnel because they're not very deep at receiver. Everybody knows what's happening with the receiver core here. And Terry McLaurin. Folks, never sweat these deals. They're trying to get it done. They know they have to do it. Remember, if you're a Commander fan, you're listening, the season starts in September. Don't worry about it. They know they're going to get a deal done. They're not trading him. Don't worry about it. People overrate this stuff. It always gets done. 99 times out of 100, it gets done. Let's put it that way. They also added Josh Connolly, who's not played right tackle before. He's moved from left to right tackle. Got to see how he does. Laremy Tunsil in the trade at left tackle. So they've upgraded significantly at left tackle. They're going to have better depth in the offensive line. See, that was the problem last year. They had poor depth. Now they've got depth. They got to figure out if Brandon Coleman's going to be their left guard. Cosme's coming back from the ACL injury. He's got an outside chance for week 1. Connolly will wind up being their right. We know Tunsil's their left. Biotish, who didn't have a great season last year, will be their center. But, it's funny. I say that. Their offensive line overachieved. Coached very well by Bobby Johnson, but they know they had to do something, and I give Adam Peters credit. He really addressed it. But I have a real problem with the run game. Brian Robinson is a downhill power runner. No explosion. They need Krosky Merritt, Ja'Cory Krosky Merritt, the 7th rounder. They need him to be a changeup. Give us some juice at running back. They badly need it. He's out of Arizona. He's a little bit older. He's 24 years old, and he's older because of a transfer issue, but he's talented. And, of course, Austin Eckler helped them with 3rd down. Receiver is kind of with McLaurin, Luke McCaffrey, who I know has had a good offseason. Debo is an inside-outside receiver. Noah Brown is coming back from an injury. Jalen Lane should wind up being their slot. We'll see if Michael Gallup, who came out of retirement, has anything left. Chris Moore is more of a special teams player. KJ Osborne is there, but the bottom line is they're not super deep at receiver, deeper than they've been, but not super deep. Ertz is still there, catching those 10-yard passes, getting first downs. Sean Bates is their Y. Ben Sinnott, who I'm told was just not ready from a mental standpoint. He's just a little bit behind. They need him to be a factor. He's pretty athletic. You could play him at fullback. He's obviously a F tight end. You can move him. Cole Turner's still there. Funny of his rookie deal, he's a athletic tight end. There's enough, and obviously Daniels and Mariota will be the backup. There's enough there for them to have a very good offense. But in terms of playing the Eagles, the first time they played the Commanders in the regular season, this is when Daniels had the rib injury. He wasn't himself. That was in Philly. The second game is when Gardner Johnson got chucked. Now, it wasn't like their defense was playing well in that game. It did not play well. But you saw how the Eagles boat raced them in the playoffs. After, like, the half was somewhat competitive. Then the Eagles absolutely crushed them the second half. But the game was never in doubt. It was just a matter of how much they were going to beat them by. But bottom line is, Washington's offense is intriguing. They're going to be better up front. Let's take a look now at the Washington defense. Now, with Dan Quinn, and he knows he had to do it, they were one of the top blitzing teams in the National Football League, over 31%. That's high in today's NFL. A lot of man coverage. They're a top 5 man coverage team at 36% last season. I don't see that changing. Who do they lose? Jonathan Allen, who they cut. Dante Fowler, who went back to Dallas. Ben St. Juste, who we told you about, and Jeremy Chin, who we told you about. They added Javon Kinlaw, came off the best season of his career. He signed a big year, a big free agent deal, coming over from the Jets. Dietrich Schweiz, who we like a lot. Greg Cosell really likes him, coming over from New England. He's at more of a rotational end. Trey Amos, a second-round pick out of Mississippi. Jonathan Jones, who could play inside or outside a corner. And Will Harris. So when you look at their defense for Washington, they don't have a big-time edge rusher. They're going to have between Armstrong, Von Miller, obviously who they just signed. We'll see if he could play around a third or 30 to 40% of their snaps. Cleveland Farrell and Wise. Those 4, there's enough there in a rotation, but they don't have a big-time edge rusher. They're still strong up front with Deron Payne, Kinlaw, Johnny Newton, Eddie Goldman, if he's committed to playing. They're going to be fine up front, but they just don't have that big-time edge rusher, and that's a problem. That's why you'll see Luvu. That's why Luvu blitzes. And by the way, they should be good against the run. Bobby Wagner's he's just not quite what he once was. They're fine up front, but they're not dominant. And you got to get a pass rusher against Hurts, who's going to tear you apart. The Eagles are too deep at receiver. At the tight end position, they're actually deeper. And it's a question of, because, by the way, with the Chargers, they lost their 2D tackles. Barkley should rip the Chargers apart. And with Washington, you saw what happened in the playoffs. So I'm not convinced that they could control the Eagles' offense. Now, are they strong enough at corner? If Amos is a player year one, if Lattimore could stay healthy, it's been 8 years he's had hamstring problems. Their plan, I'm told, is to they want to move Sainristil to nickel. He played very well outside. That's their plan. We'll see if they stick with it. They got Quan Martin who could play nickel, which he's played. He could play safety, which he's going to play. With Will Harris, that comes over from New Orleans, as I mentioned. Percy Butler will be their third tight end, their third safety. So, by the way, they have Temple's Jordan McGee, who will back up Wagner. But look, there's talent on defense. They have to be more aggressive because they just don't have enough talent overall. This is a team, the Eagles are clearly better than them. I would install them. They are, to me, just overall a five point on a neutral field. The Eagles are a 5-point better team to me. And that's who they play in week 16 and week 18. And that next game in week 18, the Eagles will host Washington in week 18. That's a Sunday game, but the time is not determined. That's January 4th, by the way. Now, let's get back to week 17 after they play Washington the first time. They play at Buffalo. Oh, my goodness. Now, if they have a blizzard, this will be a snow game. Boy, I'd love to see a snow game. This week 17 game is a 4:25 game on December 28th at Buffalo. Buffalo's offense, they did add Josh Palmer, who will start. A very sneaky ad is Elijah Moore, who could play the Z or could play slot. And Amari Cooper had a wrist injury last year, just didn't work out, unfortunately. You got James Cook at running back, who, boy, he was better than I thought. He's more explosive than Dalvin. Dalvin's more powerful, his older brother. Ray Davis out of Temple and all the other schools. Ray Davis, you might remember him as a fourth runner out of Kentucky, who also was a Temple transfer. He's a little bit older. He turns 26 in November. And Ty Johnson is a changeup. They're not great at receiver. They have depth with Palmer. Khalil Shakir could play inside or outside. Keon Coleman is their ex-receiver. Did not work out. He's going to get another chance. Curtis Samuel, the big reason why he's on the team is the guaranteed money this season. So they need Samuel to step up. The Eagles obviously know him, formerly of Washington. In Carolina, Laviska Shenault's what we call a power slot. So they have depth, but they're just not very talented at receiver. Where are the big plays downfield? That would worry me. Tight end, the athletic Dawson Knox and Dalton Kincaid. Now it's funny, Dawson Knox was an athletic tight end. Now he's more of their wide tight end. Dalton Kincaid is their move tight end. Good offensive line, not great. Spencer Brown's their right tackle. Deion Dawkins out of Temple's their left. David Edwards has been okay at left guard, coming over from the Rams. Connor McGovern, who's a veteran center, coming over from Dallas, has been there a couple years. And Osiris Torrance, who's a second round a couple years ago. It's an okay line. Eagles D-line could eat against them if they're playing at their best. And obviously, the uber talented Josh Allen, you know he could run. You know he's got a rocket arm. You got to make this guy make throws when he doesn't want to do that. Make him throw it early. Don't give him time. And then I call him crazy legs because he's a zigzag runner. He's super explosive for a guy that size. He moves better than you think. I've talked to coaches who've gone against him. They go, it's one thing to see him on tape, but it's a different when you're actually going against him live. It's hard. Mitch Trubisky will be the backup. But the good thing is, again, they're not very good at receiver in terms of overall talent. Now, they became more of a running team than you probably would think last year. I think because they're deeper at receiver, they could play more 11 than they did last year. Now, the question for the Eagles is, how good are they going to be at second corner? That's going to be a problem at right cornerback until Ringo or Dory Jackson shows me something. That's going to be the problem if teams want to spread the Eagles out. Because not only we don't know who their second corner is going to be, we don't know how good it's going to be. We don't know how good the third corner is going to be. So, you know what's coming with Buffalo. I mean, they've got James Cook is explosive. He's a screen runner, screen catcher. So you got to watch this. This is a fun matchup. Vic Fangio's defense. Make Josh Allen hold on to the ball, and if he's going to run, folks, you got to be disciplined. Now let's talk about the defense of the Bills versus the Eagles offense. And Buffalo, very aggressive in free agency in the draft. TJ Sanders, their second round out of South Carolina. D tackle Larry Ogunjobi comes over from the Steelers. Now he's got a 6-game suspension, and the Steelers, I could tell, were kind of down on him. They kind of moved on. They didn't see him as a starter anymore. They signed Michael Hoyt, excuse me, the edge rusher from the Rams has been a really nice story, but he too has got a 6-game suspension. Nick Bosa comes over from the Chargers. Shaq Thompson will be a backup. And Maxwell Hairston, the first-round corner out of Kentucky. They did cut Von Miller, and they have Rasul Douglas as a free agent. Now, they're a heavy zone team, folks. Only 20% man. They rarely blitz near the bottom at 19% blitz rate. They're very strong at D tackle. Daquan Jones, Ed Oliver, Ogunjobi, TJ Sanders. The edges, see, here's the problem with their edge group. They're deep with Hoyt, Rousseau, Joey Bosa. Epinesa is more of a power end. But the thing is, they don't have a big-time pass rusher. That's the problem. We don't know about Joey Bosa with all of his injuries. And you have to wonder what he's got left. He just turned 30. That's the problem with them, folks. This is where, and as good of a job as Brandon Beane has done, he completely missed on Von Miller, and you can't blame him. They tried it. Miller tore his ACL, and that's just the problem. They need a big time edge rusher. That's the thing that they're missing. They're really good at linebacker with Milano, but Milano's hurt a lot. And Terrell Bernard. Benford out of Villanova has been a good story at corner. I mentioned Hairston. Teron Johnson's one of the best nickels in football. They're not very good at safety with Bishop and Rapp and Hamlin. We'll see about Jordan Hancock, the 5th rounder. It's a nice defense. They're super disciplined. Eagles should not have a problem holding up with their offensive line. I don't love their corner group. Tre'Davious White's back there, by the way, corner, former first rounder for them, and he's near the end of his career, a lot of injuries. But this is a defense that you can beat. It's just you got to pick your poison. You got to be disciplined because you got to isolate when you go against McDermott's defense about who you want to exploit because it's hard. While they're not that talented, they're really well coached. And Bobby Babich is their defense coordinator, by the way. You might remember his dad, Bob, who coached for McDermott. Chris Tabors, their special teams coach, by the way, was really, really good. Look, they're good. They're a very good football team. They're the top 4, top 5 of the National Football League, but they're beatable. The Eagles, by the way, one of the best road teams in the National Football League since Nick Sirianni took over. They fear nobody. And now, if it's a snow game, it's not like the Eagles haven't played in some snow. They did against the Rams. So this will be a fun game. This is obviously one of our favorites of the year. We gave you the intel in Washington, and obviously we'll learn more. And I'll give you on our Inside the Bird shows when I'm on my training camp tour. I'll give you an idea because I'll be at Washington's camp, and if I get to the Chargers, we'll have notes with them. And yeah, I'll have notes on a lot of the teams that I visit. So stay tuned for that. Thanks for listening, and we'll talk to you next time. See you then.